Digital transformation and ERP projects are notorious for costing too much money, but I'm going to share with you today a way that you can deploy technology and a transformation at no cost. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world reach the third stage of digital transformation success. And for the last 25 years, I've been working with clients and helping them through their digital transformations. One of the most common challenges that they have is that these projects cost way too much money. They spend too much, they don't plan to spend as much as they do, and ultimately the budgets run way over what they ultimately expect. And to be honest, cloud software, today's technology, modern technologies cost a lot of money. If you're investing in new technology, it's going to cost you an arm and a leg to invest in that money. And many of you are not in a position where you can necessarily budget for that. And to add insult to injury, a lot of software vendors are forcing a migration to new cloud solutions that are going to cost you more money in the long term. So the question becomes, how can we go through a transformation without spending all this money and without redirecting resources and money that could be spent elsewhere? How can we do that in a way that's cost effective to allow us to free up cash and resources to invest elsewhere? And that's what I want to talk about here today. If you'd like to learn more about digital transformation strategies and best practices and general software reviews and independent rankings of different solutions in the marketplace, I encourage you to download our 2025 Digital Transformation Report. It's a report we publish each year, and it contains a number of best practices that will help you through your transformation. You can download that for free on our website by scanning the QR code right here, or you can go to the links below. The first thing to consider when you're evaluating this $0 or free transformation that I'm talking about here today is to consider the fact that the traditional enterprise technology model isn't working. For decades now, organizations have been spending way too much money on their transformations. They've been over-investing in technology, and they've been investing in shelfware or software that just sits there that they're not using or getting value out of. And there's so many projects out there where they get into such trouble that they pull the plug on the project and ultimately decide that they're going to scrap the project altogether. There's just a lot of wasted money and inefficiency in these digital transformations. And that's something that has to change, especially nowadays where you're committing and signing up for a cloud-based subscription where you're going to be paying these monthly and annual fees into perpetuity, whether you get value out of the technology or not. So that's the danger of going through the traditional enterprise technology and ERP implementation approach. And what we are seeing today is that there's too many organizations that are just spending way too much money on these projects. You look at these big, massive failures where they spend tens or maybe even hundreds of millions of dollars on their implementations, and many of them don't have any value to show for it. Many of them have operational disruption and they're not able to ship product or run payroll or close the books. There's a lot of issues that come out of these traditional enterprise tech projects. So we need to be looking more at not only how can we mitigate risk and ensure that we're not putting our operations in jeopardy, but also how can we ensure that we're not overspending on technology and overspending on our implementation. And software vendors and system integrators for years have been enjoying the fact that organizations are spending too much time and money on these projects. So now may be a good time for organizations to consider the way they approach enterprise technology investments. Another challenge with traditional and historical enterprise technology projects and digital transformations is that organizations spend way too much money on the technology and they underinvest in the more important factors such as people and processes and strategy. This is understandable because most organizations can look and see and touch and feel an actual software system. So they feel like when they invest in that technology, that's where the money should go and where the resources and effort should go. But in reality, the real differentiator, the real thing that's going to make a project successful has nothing to do with the technology. It has more to do with the organizational change, the operational improvements, the overall strategy alignment, and just the overall low-hanging fruit that comes with any sort of digital transformation. But organizations instead spend way too much money investing in these technologies that don't deliver any real business value. And so what we need to do is look at how can we redeploy resources away from technology, which is the more expensive part of a project, delivering much less value, but how can we redirect those resources, time, money, and budgets into the things that will actually make you successful in your transformation and deliver the low-hanging fruit and the ROI you're looking for. And if you redeploy the resources away from technology into your processes and people, your chances are much higher of achieving actual business value and a positive ROI and a successful project than if you were to overinvest in technology and get bogged down by all the technical complexities that come with a new modern ERP system or a new modern technology that you might be deploying. Now, I'm not suggesting you ignore technology altogether, but what I am suggesting is that you can probably throttle back a lot of that spending that's so expensive for organizations and redirect that money towards the organizational change piece of it and the business process improvement piece of it. And when you look at just those two pieces, you're likely to find a lot of low-hanging fruit that's going to deliver a lot of business value, a lot of improvements, even without investing in new technologies. So one way to look at this is to say, how can we improve our business with low-hanging fruit by not necessarily over-investing in new technologies, but instead, how can we change our processes, change our roles and responsibilities, change the way people operate, use lower cost technologies to enable improvements to the business? How can we do that instead of investing in these big, massive, bloated ERP and enterprise-wide technology solutions? And organizations that invest wisely in the business and people side of things are the ones that are much more successful than the ones that overinvest in technologies, because the ones that overinvest in technologies typically get bogged down by all the technical stuff that really doesn't matter at the end of the day and doesn't materially impact or improve your business. When we're working with organizations that come to us and say, hey, third stage consulting team, we want you to guide us through a digital transformation, one of the first questions we ask is why? Why do you want to go through a digital transformation? And a lot of times we get very vague or nebulous answers around how the software vendor's forcing us to upgrade, or our system is outdated, or we don't have anyone that can support this technology because it's homegrown and the person that developed it is retired and they're long gone. And there's a lot of reasons like that that lead organizations to digital transformations. But when we really peel back the onion and dig into an organization, we oftentimes find that they have a lot of tools and technologies and resources that are underutilized, that if they just figured out how to make better use of those resources and tools, they might get immediate business value with a very low risk and very low investment. For example, a lot of organizations have shelfware that's just been sitting there for years. They've got modules that they've never used. They've got departments that have never fully adopted the technology they have. They've never fully integrated the core ERP system to other legacy systems. All these different things you look at in the landscape oftentimes lead you to the conclusion that the organization has totally underutilized the technologies and tools that they have. And this is just based on legacy technologies. Even organizations that invested in ERP systems 5, 10, 20 years ago, oftentimes will find that they've got modules they never decided to use. They've got people that are working outside the system. If they just would work within the system, they could get immediate business value. And then you fast forward to today's day and age where most organizations are using Office 365 or some other sort of office-based productivity tool that includes AI mechanisms that might be things that they're already paying for. And these are tools that they could be using to immediately add business value to improve their business processes and make people more efficient. For example, you look at Microsoft's Copilot. There's so many organizations we work with where they are already investing in and paying for Microsoft's Copilot. Sometimes they don't even know it, sometimes they do, but many times, most of the time, they don't even realize there's a lot of business value they could be getting out of Copilot. If they just figured out how to redesign business processes, redesign people's jobs, and educate people on how to use that product, that can deliver immediate business value at no cost, no incremental additional cost than what's already been invested in the organization. So this is why it's so important for organizations to really take a step back and not be too pressured by software vendors to invest in new technologies when they haven't even fully taken advantage of the technologies and tools they already have. So that's one thing you could do, is really look at what are some of these incremental improvements you can make, and what are some of the improvements you can make with the existing tool set you have, and how can we optimize and improve the tool sets that you already have and you've already paid for. And that's another way that you can get away with going through a digital transformation without really paying the high price tag that most digital transformations experience. Another thing to remember is that you can start slow and you can spend more money later. So often, software vendors and their sales reps will offer you the sun, moon, and the stars. They'll try to sell you everything, and they'll try to convince you that investing in their complete suite of products is going to completely transform your business, completely make life easier, and provide a silver bullet to get you to the next level that you're trying to achieve for your business. Now, in some cases that's true, but in most cases what we find is that organizations are being oversold. They're being sold too much software they're never going to use, they can't consume it. The organizations are so far behind technologically and in their maturity level, whereas software vendors are so far ahead of where most organizations are, that it's just a waste of money for them to overinvest in these advanced emerging technologies that they can't use, especially for organizations that are still using old legacy homegrown mainframe systems, for example. To go from that environment to a fully cloud-based environment with AI tools and all these advanced features, that's a huge jump, and it's probably not likely for most organizations. So instead, what we need to do is look at how can we start slow and slowly invest in new technologies, new tool sets, new improvements, new process optimizations, new organizational changes, and start to get some momentum behind the project, and then realize that you can always spend more money later. But once you invest and commit to a cloud-based solution, an AI tool, whatever the tool set is, you're committed. You're paying that money regardless of whether or not you're getting the business value out of it. So organizations need to focus more on how can we start slow and get some immediate value, some immediate ROI, and then you can always spend more money later. And I always look forward to meeting that client, which I've not yet met yet, but I'm looking forward to meeting that client that says, you know what, we invested too slow. We wish we would have been more aggressive because we're so good at digital transformation and we're so good at adapting these tools into our operations that we should have started sooner. I've yet to hear that. Most clients are on the opposite side of the spectrum. They overinvested, they wasted money, and they wish they wouldn't have. So the good news is if you start slow, you can always invest later. But if you invest too much early on and waste that money early on, there's no getting out of it. So you might as well start slow, and if you need to, you can speed up later. Now, it's important to remember that the biggest operational improvements for most organizations don't necessarily require new technologies. You look at the inefficiencies that you have within your organization. Think about the manual spreadsheets and the rework and the broken processes that your organization and your team is facing right now. Chances are pretty high that there might be a technological component to that, but chances are also pretty high that it might just be that people weren't trained on the appropriate process. Maybe they weren't using the software appropriately. Maybe there's shelfware that you've invested in, but you're not using, or you haven't rolled it out to your broader community. There's so many low-hanging fruit, low-cost types of things that organizations could do just to take advantage of what they already have. And when you look at these business process and organizational improvements, chances are pretty high that those improvements are going to deliver a lot more business value than trying to slam in or force in a brand new technology that completely disrupts and changes your business. Now, long term, it may be something you need to do. Longer term, yes, maybe you need to invest more aggressively in new technology because your technology stack is so outdated. You've got the technical debt, all that stuff. That's the kind of stuff that software vendors and industry analysts will convince you or try to convince you of, is that you've got technical debt, you need to invest. But the reality is the most immediate value and the biggest improvements are likely going to come from process and people changes, not necessarily the technology. And getting back to my previous point, you can always invest more in technology later, but once you've committed to a cloud-based subscription and a broad tool set of ERP or AI or whatever the tool set is, you're pretty well locked in and committed to that, and it's going to cost you a lot of money, whether you get the business value or not. So you might as well focus on the things that are going to deliver more immediate business value and give you a better ROI, and get those things out of the way first. So the strategies I've shared with you today are designed to give you some options to go through a transformation without necessarily over-investing in new technology. In fact, a lot of the things I've suggested here today will cost you very little to nothing to go through the process. Now, of course, it'll cost you time, it'll cost you focus, but it's going to avoid that big, massive price tag that sinks a lot of companies. And a lot of companies go bankrupt because they spend too much money on technology, and those projects are such a disaster and so disruptive to the organization that they end up in real trouble. And so what I'm sharing with you here today is a more incremental, low-risk, high-value type of approach that you can go down to maybe not have a completely free digital transformation, but one that's certainly going to cost you exponentially less than the average organization that spends way too much time and money on a project with very little to show for it. Now, if you'd like to learn more about some best practices to help you through your project, I encourage you to download our 2025 Digital Transformation Report. It's a report we publish each year that contains a number of best practices, lessons learned, as well as independent software reviews and rankings to help you evaluate and identify the best technologies that are best for your organization. And we'll also share with you in that guide some things that you could do to improve your business even if you don't invest in new technologies. So I hope you found this information useful and hope you have a great day. Too long and too much, nope. But I'm going to talk today about how you can clarify, and there's so many projects out there where the plug gets pulled. Digital transformation. So now may be the time to reconsider the way you've, so now be, blah, 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 blah. And the organizations that invest smart, that's not the right word.